Welcome. Jenny, but did you ever get any response from Domain about moving your listings over?
We have not heard anything yet. I guess you haven't either?
So I sent a second email the other day. And I sent it also to the main email box in case he wasn't getting the email.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'll text him because Adis, I'm on the phone with Adis right now. Did your listings transfer yet?
Yeah, I haven't seen any transfer.
Okay.
So I guess the only other option we have is to go ahead and terminate them and re-enter them. And that's possible since it was your listing. You might be able to just copy it over. But you probably should just let your seller know what's going on.
Okay, I will. I'll message him.
Sorry, I other than
You.
maybe I could call over there and see if I could reach him. I don't know. I've not usually had that kind of difficulty with people.
Same, but I've tried leaving there before and he wasn't happy, so I'm sure he's not happy that we left and didn't talk to him.
Okay, well,
Whatever.
well, I'm willing to place one phone call and just say, hey, I mean, I don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah, I'll reach out to him one more time.
Yeah, okay. I just don't want you to, I mean, obviously you're still accessible. It's not hurting you and that your number's still there and everything, but I'd like to go ahead and get it done for you. So,
Thank
okay.
you.
All right. So, welcome everybody. I think there's a couple of new faces here. So what we try to do is start out every week with a little bit of insight into the market. And then I usually pick a topic in the contract that we go over. And this is like open session. So unmute yourself and ask any question you want. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. Last Friday, I did the luxury market stats, and those are for homes selling over $1 million. And I usually do them for both Collier and Lee. And then I share them with a mailing list of luxury people. So if you'd like to be on that list, just go ahead and send me an email. It's jonesnaples@kw.com. I can put that in the chat, but I think most of you have my email. But if you want to be added to that mailing list, I usually mail them out toward the end of the month after our mastermind on the 25th. So, but I guess what I'm interested to show you today is, now these are all sales over $1 million. So we're looking at what Keller Williams defines for our market is any listing or sale over $1 million. And if you have a listing over $1 million, you can use all of the KW luxury logos and flyers and everything in the KW luxury library, including signs and so forth. Those are available to you. And if you have 2 sales over $1 million in a 24-month period, then you automatically can join KW Luxury and use the luxury logo in your signature and use all the luxury materials for mailings to your database. So just be aware, it's not a huge distinction, but it does have $1 million cutoff, which the way prices are rising, it's almost like Sanibel. The lean to on Sanibel is $3 million. So anyhow, if you have an interest in any of this, there is a really great website that you can get to through KW Connect. And you just go to KW Connect and log in with your normal email and password, or username and password, excuse me. And then you can go to the KW Luxury site, and it's got a lot of good stuff on there. So if you haven't visited that, kind of a cool place to visit. Maybe we can take a quick look at it later. But by way of market update, if you look at just sales over $1 million, the market is quite a bit different than the entire market in Lee and Collier that we data that we released earlier this month. Usually I run the numbers for the overall market around the 10th, and then usually about the middle of the month we run the luxury numbers and publish them for our mastermind. We have 2 masterminds a month, luxury masterminds. They're available on your calendar. And it's just a participative group that's interested in talking about luxury. So look at overall median prices becoming very stable. Now we're comparing May 22 to May 21. So remember, 2021 was considered one of the best years ever in real estate. And so up until now, we've seen 21 shine over 22, but now we're starting to see a shift in the luxury market. And basically take a look at prices flattening up a little bit in condos, but those are the middle sale of all the 402 sales that we had last month. So prices are stabilizing quite a bit. Days on market still down. You know, there's quite a bit of stability coming back in the market, but for those of you that have looked at my last 7-day chart, there's just as many price decreases as there are new listings. So there's a lot of opportunity coming back in the market. A lot of people, I think, that took the opportune time to say, well, my neighbor just sold for 1.2, so I'll go on at 1.8. And because there was little or no inventory, a lot of people were able to sell at prices pretty far above the market. So now the market's flattening a little bit in terms of new listings coming in the market and in terms of price decreases. So we're getting more balance in the market. So we're selling slightly less than we're adding in listings. And the good news is, as we add inventory, prices are stabilizing, and people that were shooting for the moon in many of these luxury markets are now going, gosh, I'm not selling at this price. No, the market's doing what it's said it's supposed to do, which is balance. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about an article that I read that says, stop Googling bubble. There's no bubble here, or none of the experts that I can read, and I try to read quite a bit through Inman and many sources that come into my email every week. There just isn't any substance for a bubble. Yes, there's substance for prices to come down a little bit in some neighborhoods where they were pretty much out of whack. So look at new listings up 38% over last year. 433 new listings came in over $1 million in the month of May, and that was up 38% over 2021. Pending sales down just slightly, but look at, we put 433 in and took 358 out. That means we're building inventory. And if you come over to the inventory list, you'll start to see that inventory is climbing over last year. And we're getting up into the 4-month range for overall in single family homes. Condos still a little bit behind in supply. And you see that the median prices are up a little bit for condos. Condos kind of jumped in popularity last year, especially in the middle and end of the year when there wasn't any or hardly any single family home inventory. So we saw a demand increase for condos now, so that supply is starting to come back up. So we're talking about a shift, and there's many aspects of this shift that are good. More choices for buyers, more stability in the pricing, and demand kind of matching or even slightly below what supply is. And so those are healthy conditions. You'll see that in Collier, we had 6% better overall sales over last year, which was a great year. And single family homes up 5%, condos up 8%. The numbers above the for sale signs are list price to sell price, and they are the last list price to sell price. So we're still seeing prices holding quite well, even though some of these prices are being reduced. When they're being reduced, they're selling for very similar to their list price. So it's still not a great environment for people to come in and offer 80% or 90% of list and expect to get some advantage. So that's Collier. Let's take a look at Lee, which actually is a much different situation. Let's see here. How am I going to do this?
Come on, Jeff.
Me and my screen share ability here. I've set all this up. If I can delete that Lee County somewhere. Nope, hold on. The best laid plans are going awry here in my sharing, but I can recover. Let's see. All right, back to Zoom, back to share. Yay. Okay, thank you for your patience. This is Lee County. Interesting to see the difference between the two counties. Obviously, demographically, they're very different, and the luxury market is very different, but there's a lot of new construction in the luxury market. You know, what is it, Wild Blue and some of the other communities that are new that now are considered luxury because many of their selling prices are well over $1 million. And it's kind of interesting to see this behaving differently than Collier. So you see, again, median prices fairly flat. Condos up a little bit. Few more days on market than Collier and still coming down over last year. But the reason I think that these are coming down to a certain extent is the number of price reductions that we've seen, where the market is actually seeing new listings and price reductions. So availability for buyers kind of in both choices there. So we see new listings up 87% over last year. Look at pendings up 56% over last year. So the market activity for over $1 million homes in Lee County is quite a bit different in terms of pending, more robust. Inventory, again, we're starting to see actually it come down a little bit over last year, but around 4 months, and then with condos slightly behind that. But because you see the increase in pending sales, you see the increase to the right in overall sales over last year, we're starting to see the effect of the new inventory and the price reductions. You're starting to see them take effect there. So it's quite a bit different market than Collier, and there's a lot of supply being added, a lot more pending activity, and quite a few more sales. So again, these go out to the luxury mailing list, which you're welcome to add yourself onto. Just email Jeff jonesnaples@kw.com, and I'll be glad to add you to that list. All right. Let me just show you one other chart if I can here. Oh, there we go. All right. So every Tuesday, I put this chart out on the Facebook page, and go ahead and share that. Okay. That there. All right. Let's see if we can. Yay. So this is a chart that goes out every Tuesday. That seems to be a day to look at the last 7 days and get a good barometer of what's going on. But again, let's take a look at these numbers real quick because they're kind of important. Take a look at the overall market in Southwest Florida. 836 new listings, 758 sold, 799 pending, and 838. Now you can look at Lee, similar 530, 481, 524, 496, and Collier. But look at the balance in that market. There's a lot of new listings coming in. There's, if you combine, you can look at the price reductions plus the new listings to be like 1,600 new opportunities that have come in the market in the last 7 days. And we haven't been selling more than we've been adding. So that's why we're building inventory. And, you know, we have still a lot of activity, sales activity, 799, which is going to be sales over the next 30 to 60 days, but still not outpacing the amount of new inventory that's coming in. And again, all this stuff is on our private Facebook page. And if you want it emailed directly to you for a newsletter or whatever, just send me an email and I'm happy to send it to you. Okay, so a couple of other ways of looking at the market here. So we've been looking at month over month comparisons, but now what I've started to do in the last guess I've got too many things to share here, so give me 1 second. There we go. There we go. So if you take a look at this chart here, and can everybody see that okay? Give me this. So yes, thumbs up. Anything will do.
Yes.
Okay. So let's take a look at what's happening. This is Collier County luxury market, price range $1 million and over, all residential sales in the county. And we're comparing now, we're taking a look at from last March to May. So what I started putting these charts out for was, it's one thing to compare this May over last May, but it's another thing to look at, see what's happening in the market over time here. And if you take a look at the light green bar is the total number of properties for sale over $1 million. And you can see that starting in really in January and February, we started to see a little activity. But look at March, April, and May in terms of the total number of properties for sale. That's price reductions, new listings, combination. You can see that the sales are climbing. They have been climbing. That's the dark green bars. And the new listings also up starting in January, up substantially, trailing off a little bit, but still up quite a bit over anything we saw last year if you take this 417 and go across. And then look at the pendings. Pendings started going up and now they're kind of trailing off a little bit. So this is a good chart to take if you have a newsletter or sending things out to your customers and they always want to know how's the market. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, the market is improving greatly. Prices are flattening out a little bit. And there's a lot more alternatives out there in the market than there have been. So this is all good news here. We'll look at it just another way real quick here. I say real quick and then I gotta find it. So. Okay, so this is a second way of looking at this, in which we're looking at the month's supply of inventory versus the median price for a sale over $1 million. But if you take a look, median prices aren't not jumping anymore. And month supply has started down a little bit and now back up a little bit. And I think that we're starting to see more inventory coming in the market, and the trend is good, and the median prices are kind of flat there. So all good news. Let's take a look at Lee County real quick here. Share screen. There we go. So Lee County, kind of even more pronounced in some of these charts, but look at the number of total, starting in December, look at the number of total properties available for sale. And then take a look then in the dark green bar, see since January, we've started a fairly steady increase in the number sold. But look at the new listings coming out. And then the pendings trending off a little bit. So all of this is balancing the market. We're no longer overselling everything that comes on the market. And sometimes the lack of inventory creates upward prices on pressure, or upward pressure on prices in individual sales. So again, I'll publish these charts to the, we have a luxury group that meets twice a month, and I always send this out to them. So feel free to email me if you'd like to be on this list. So that's kind of the end of the market update. So today I want to focus on a couple of things, contract wise. Let's see what we got here. We've been doing quite a bit of work on the sales contracts, so I want to kind of focus a little bit more today on the listing contract. And that is right here, if I can find it. There we go. Okay, so this is the neighbor listing contract. To be honest with you, this is I think a little bit easier contract to work with than the FAR, and you can use this contract anywhere in the Florida. But even if you're looking at Lee County properties, this contract, I think, is a little bit more complete and thorough, and I'll explain why. First of all, in the first few paragraphs, you'll notice that we have gone to great length to define what is included with the sale if it's there. Obviously, if there's no beverage cooler, you don't have to draw a line through it. But if there is a beverage cooler and it's not excluded, it conveys. So by providing a fairly exhaustive list, we accomplished a few things. Number one, we made it easier for the buyers to get everything that's either considered real property or personal property that's in the home at closing. And number two, by using this list, we mirrored it in the sales contract so that the identical wording would carry over. So if you've had your conversation with your seller and decided exactly what's going to convey, it can move over to the sales contract. And if there's an exclusion list, obviously you can, if there's an exclusion list, you can obviously provide that. So a few things here. Number one, televisions are not included, they're brackets only. It's like a painting, it's hanging on the wall. The hook is is a fixture, the painting is not. So if I really always give my spiel whenever I'm teaching the contracts, and that is, for those of you that play tennis, you can relate to the fact that in tennis, love means nothing. In real estate, as shown per MLS, turnkey, furnished, partially furnished, all mean the same thing as love and tennis. Absolutely nothing. So you really need, when you're working with your seller, to get an exact idea of what the seller's expecting to convey. If it's turnkey, fine, make a list. Have the seller sign off on it. because when you go to contract, you've got to have exact agreement on what's going to convey. Otherwise, there's a chance for great drama. And because I'm all on the receiving end of many of those situations where there's great drama, I can tell you that it's almost always because you go to the walkthrough with your buyer and all of a sudden what you thought was going to be there isn't there. And now the buyer's unhappy and the seller's already taken it and gone, and the seller believed that it was the seller's. But if you had a simple inventory, either photos or written, and you signed off on it and it wasn't there when you went to your walkthrough, bingo, Mr. Seller, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you signed for this painting in the bedroom to be there and it's not there. So either need to bring it back or compensate me. But if you don't have an inventory and all you have is the word turnkey, or you have an understanding everybody's, gonna play nice and there won't be any problems, you're really running a risk for your customer. And a lot of what we do in these contracts is try to maintain a great relationship with your customer and give you the reason to work with your customer so they have a great experience. And you know what? I'm not aware of any 401ks or retirement accounts in this business. Really, all we have is the relationships we have with our customers and the fact that they will know, like, and trust us and use us again or recommend us to other people. But if they have a terrible experience moving in where things that they thought were there aren't there, how likely are they to recommend you and work with you again? We think that the average person or family in this market, every 3 to 5 years, they make a real estate move. And if you have a great experience with them and you stay in touch with them, there's a real good chance that they'll use you again, maybe recommend you to some friends. So all of what we do in these contract classes is to try to give you the insight into why this language is there and how you can use it to protect your customer there. So there's a lot more detail in the NABOR version of the listing contract. As a matter of fact, you look at the FARBAR contract, there is no washer dryer, and most of these terms are not there. So if they're not specified, or there isn't a separate inventory, that's where drama can pop into your otherwise calm situation there. So that's why I like the NABOR contract a little bit better. It's more specific and more definitive as to what's going to convey. And you know what? You still saw days on market in the 20s and 30s. So while you're taking the listing and shortly after getting everything ready and taking your pictures, great idea to take an inventory. I know it's a PIA. It takes time and it's detailed but these are the things can really help you solidify your relationship with your seller. So always take an inventory. If you want to take pictures, that's fine. I'm not a big fan of videos because sometimes it's difficult to see, what is and what isn't in a video. But if photographs are if you like those kinds of things, take photographs. But now you have something to present and upload it with your listing and your MLS. You have something to present to the other side when they present you a contract saying, hey, here's what we're planning on conveying. Everybody signs off on that. Now you have a chance for a smooth running closing there. So couple of other things in here that I like about the NABOR contract. One of the things you'll understand is working with me is in teaching contracts is Broker Jeff is not a fan of blanks. I don't know when you leave it blank whether you didn't look at it, didn't go over it with your seller, or whether you're using a default. And in many of these things, there is no default. There is a default for the commencement and termination date of the contract, but really prefer you spell that out so you and your customer are on the same page, because I'm not sure that they will read that and realize that if there's no date in there, it's 270 days from the commencement date. And that, is a rather long listing agreement. especially in this market. So try to put a starting and ending date in there. As we get toward the end of the year, we cross over September. I see a lot of times where we put September 15th, 2022, going to January 20th, 2022, which is the problem. So make sure those dates are there and they're accurate. One of the interesting things is people don't realize is what happens when the property's under contract when it's very close to the listing expiring. So if you look on line 22, and again, this is something I often find people say, well, I didn't know that. If you look at end of line 21 and 22 and 23, if seller prior to termination date enters into a contract to convey seller's interest in the property, the termination date in this listing contract shall automatically be extended until the earlier the closing date or the termination of said contract. So what you're saying there is, if I go under contract and I go under contract today, and my listing's supposed to expire on June 30th, and I'm supposed to close on August 15th, the contract is automatically extended to August 15th. So you don't have to really go back and ask your customer for an extension because they've agreed to it in the listing contract. But definitely don't let it expire while it's pending. I'm not sure you can even do that in the MLS anymore. I think you'll get an error message. But don't worry about it having to get an extension with your seller if you're under contract. You automatically can extend the contract to the end of the till the closing date. All right. A few things here that I see are kind of important in this contract. You see the little pound sign there? The pound sign is meant not to put 2 parking spaces, but to put A101 and A103 if there are specific assignments. Especially for parking spaces, not so much for, well, garage spaces. But if you put the number there, then you're locking in the fact that that's what you're selling. And you're also saying that to the buyer. But interestingly enough, if you've ever sold in a tower and high rise, there's a lot of inequity in parking spaces based on when people bought. So you could have your parking space right next to the elevator and you could put 1 in there, and then all of a sudden the neighbor could come along and say, hey Jeff, I see you're selling. My parking space is all the way over the other side. Can we switch? And we get onto the office and we switch, and the buyer becomes very unhappy when they realize that they're not getting the parking space they thought. Legal description comes from the property appraiser's office. Always a great idea to go to the property appraiser's site. And that in there you can make sure of a number of things. As a matter of fact, let's do that just for fun. Listing number here. Here, 2370. Okay, so figure out how to share this. I'll be in good shape here. Okay, can everybody see this okay?
Yes.
Okay, so what we did was we searched the database this, I just happened to pick out one of our listings, and you can search the database. We can go back, I think. You can search the database by anything you want. And we search the database for an address. So the reason I suggest you do this while you're preparing your listing is because there's a great deal of information on this site that can help you. First of all, let's look at, we can look at the deed. I'm not sure this shows up, but and there's the deed. So we always want to look at the deed. Why do we want to look at the deed? Because even though you're, whoever called you to list the property or whoever your contact is, you really need to look at the deed and see what the name of the, what name is the property in. And I just picked this at random, but you can see the grantor and the grantee was Maria Shepherd, a single person. Okay, so now you're in fairly good shape there. You only have one person that's on the deed, but this could be 4 or 5 families or 4 or 5 people that have bought this property with a shared interest. It could be a trust. It could be an estate. And what you want there is you want to make sure that you have the right person and that you write the listing contract for the right people. If it's a trust or it's an estate, that should set a bell off for you to make sure that you know a little more about how the property is being sold. If it's an LLC, do I have the person that's authorized to sell the property? If it's an estate, am I dealing with a personal representative? Is the property in probate? So there's a great deal of information that you can find from the property appraiser's website. I just happened to pick one here. This happened to be a single person, so it's easy. Maria can sign the listing contract and the sales contract, and we're in good shape. But if that said trust, or that said estate of, or that said Maria Shepherd LLC, you have to know that you're dealing with the person that has the authority to sign the listing contract. You can go to the property detail and you can see a few other things. First of all, you can see that there's permits here, right? You can see that in 2018 there was a permit here with no CO date. So you might say to yourself, I don't know what that permit is. I don't know whether it's been closed or not, but it's not a definitive search, but it is information that might help you to deal with your seller and say, are you aware that the air conditioner person you hired to put new air conditioner in didn't ever close the permit? So those are good things to know. What else can you find out here? You'll notice that in the property detail, there is usually a square footage here, right? So this can tell you a little bit about they're talking about the area of the residential is 1734, and there's a garage and a brick deck. So you can tell a little bit about the square footage of the place, make sure that it matches. And this is the property appraiser's drawing of the property. So again, you want to make sure that when you're going to put this in the MLS, you got to make sure you understand that this is a separate a garage, right? And this is a deck, screen porch, main area, and then there's a brick patio up front. And the property appraiser assigns different amounts of square footage to these things based on this being 100% air conditioned space and these being out parcels, outbuildings and brick decks. So understand a little bit about the property. and about what square footage it is, and make sure, when you're listing it, that you know what that is and understand it. You can also look at the tax bill. I'm sure we have to go off the share for that.
Hey, Jeff, real quick. If the seller is listed as a trust, would you get a copy of the trust?
It's not necessary to get the copy of the trust, but it is to make sure that you're dealing with somebody that can sign for that trust. If it's a revocable trust and it's in the seller's name, that's fine. But if it's another name or there's a trustee involved, yeah, I mean, you know that trustee has the authority to sign a real estate contract. Or if there's a power of attorney, does the power of attorney give the person that has the power of attorney authority to sell the property? So yeah, it's not necessary that you maybe get a copy of the trust, but that you at least make sure that the person you're dealing with, has the authority to sign for that trust.
So
And
how would you confirm that if you don't have a copy?
well, I mean, I guess you would have to have confirmation if the person that you're talking to says, I'm the trustee of this trust. Yeah, it probably, I guess I changed my mind. It's not a bad idea to have a copy of that trust, at least presented to you, whether or not
Okay.
keep it. But you're really dealing with just making sure that that person does have that person is the trustee that
Right.
can vouch for that trust. So in an estate, you want to know who is the personal representative of the estate, because they generally have the authority to sign listing contracts. And you also want to know if it wasn't in a trust and it's an estate, then it has to go through probate, and it has to go through probate in Florida, not in Michigan where the family attorney is. So and believe me, it could take some time to go through probate, 60 to 90 days. And so you have to make sure that you have to make sure that you can sell the property in the time that you're going to put it on the market. So let me
Right.
see, share here. Let's see. I am jumping all around here. Let's see if I can. There we go. Okay, there's one last thing I'd like to show you here. This is a tax bill, right? And it is something you should look at. So this is a very simple one, but they can get more complicated. So when you look at a tax bill, you're looking at ad valorem and non-ad valorem taxes, okay? And in the listing contract and the sales contract, it refers to CDDs and MSTUs. So if it's in a CDD, you're going to see a non-ad valorem assessment here for a separate entity that operates the CDD. Okay. In this particular case, the only non-ad valorem assessment we have is for the garbage, and that's our friends at Waste Management. It's collected by the county, but it's not part of the county tax. If it's a CDD, the collection is done by the county, but the money goes to the operator of the CDD, and that is listed separately, and you have to have the CDD MSTU agreement that the buyer is going to assume the balance in that. If you're in the ad valorem tax and you see an MSTU or an MSTD, that is a local tax for sidewalks. It could be for streetlights. It could be for landscaping the median. And these things are done locally, and they're collected by the county, and the county administers them locally. So if you have an agent that says to you, I need a separate agreement for this MSTD here for $183, the answer is no. It's an ad valorem tax. It's not a non-ad valorem tax, so it doesn't have to be separately disclosed. So again, by looking at the tax bill, you gain information about what the property looks like. If there's a separate line on here, it's probably a CDD, an MSTU, or it could be a PACE loan, which requires separate treatment. So it's always a good idea to look at the tax bill, and always a good idea to make sure the tax bill's paid, because you might go jumping in there and find the last 2 tax bills haven't been paid, and then there may be tax certificates out, which could complicate your sale. All right, so I'm going to stop that and hopefully get back somewhere near where we were. Anyhow, the property appraiser site is somewhere I think you should always go to when you are getting ready to prepare a listing, or even maybe before you go on your listing appointment. So you have questions that you can ask. Okay. Let's see where we are here. That is that's one down here. Where is my listing contract? Where is it gone? Let's start closing some of these windows. Yeah. Technical difficulties here trying to get the listing contract back up, but let me see what I can do here.
I don't see your screen either, Jeff, if that is helpful.
Okay. Let's see here. Screen sharing 101. I think I'm flunking here. Too many screens at one time. Let me go back and see if I can get the listing contract. There we go. All right. Hooray. Okay. So we're back to the listing contract. And again, I try to divert where I think I can be of value to you, as far as, going to the property appraiser site and making sure we're dealing with the right seller, and that we have the information we need to get the listing contract signed. So other points of highlight here. Remember that the MLS 8.0 rule says that you need to enter it into the MLS within 5 business days of the commencement date, or 1 business date of advertising it to the public. So yes, you can begin your advertising on Friday and put it in the MLS on Monday. So you have a 1-day grace period in there that you can use to maybe do a little bit of pre-advertising and still get it in the MLS within 1 business day. But the seller has to understand that if you check that box and you put a sign in the yard, or you start any type of advertising campaign, then you need to have it in the MLS within 1 day. Now, the other thing that I think is very important to know is the commencement date of the listing does start the clock for 5 business days, unless you say, okay, we're gonna start the listing today, but we're gonna do some painting and some pictures, and we're not gonna be able to get it into the MLS till the end of next week. So you can go down to the other terms and conditions, and you can say, you know, all parties agree that the listing shall not be placed on the MLS until photos, staging, whatever are complete, no later than July 7th or something, whatever you want to put in there. So you can always have a different on MLS date than a commencement date. So I do get a lot of calls going, you know, we need to do a little bit of work on the place. And you know, the thing I don't recommend is that you say, well, you're not going to put it on the MLS until July 7th. So you put July 7th as your commencement date. That's where I think you can expose yourself to a problem. It may not happen frequently, but it does happen where you sign a listing agreement out into the future, and all of a sudden your customer runs into a long lost friend who's just moved back to Naples and got their real estate license and said, gee, I'd really love to list your place. And if they sign a date ahead of your date, your contract's in trouble. So always make the commencement date the date that you're signing the listing with your customer. And if you want to have a different on MLS date, that's no problem. You can agree with your seller not to put it on MLS for you know, a period of time after the start of the listing agreement. So that's one thing that I think is not widely understood, that you can have MLS rules permit you to have an on MLS date. Okay. If they're not going to put it on the MLS, understand the customer has to understand that you cannot promote this really in any way in any means that the general public might discover. So, okay. Obviously, you want a lockbox if at all possible, even if you're not planning on using it as the primary showing technique. Maybe you want to hide it somewhere in case there's some way you can't be there. We pretty much operate as transaction brokers. So again, I'd like you to fill that in, but it does default to that. When we talk about seller's obligations, obviously these are things you want to go over with your seller. One of the things is to provide the broker with a complete copy of the owner's title policy, if available. And if there's a survey, those are an elevation certificate, it's a great idea to get those two. So obviously we're acknowledging that the broker is going to retain the rights to any marketing materials, including video, pictures, all that. Those are going to be the property of the broker. And let's talk a little bit about 118 through 120. It's really easy to go to the store now and for, you know, a nominal amount of money to get a camera that will go out through the internet and give you a view of what's going on in your home, and also to listen. But there's issues with listening to parties without their written permission. So there was a recent court case that they told us about in January, where I think it was an appraiser going into a house. He went into the house and later learned that he was recorded on video and audio. Video recording is considered somewhat minor, since they're saying the average person gets videoed, you know, 20, 30 times a day when they're going out into stores and into the public. So video surveillance is not quite as significant as audio. But if your customer is going to use any of those means of looking at what's going on while there's an open house or a showing, they need to understand that they could have some liability for that. In the case of this appraiser, you know, he found out he was recorded by voice and video. He sued, and the court said, hey, you're a real estate appraiser. You should have expectations that you could have been recorded. And they did not award the the appraiser, any damages. Prior to that, pretty much everything we had known was that if there's going to be any kind of audio recording, that there has to be permission. Again, you can't stop your customer from using their surveillance equipment to record and listen, but you can tell them that they could be exposed to some liability if the information that they get from that surveillance is deemed to be damaging to the other party. On the other hand, you're working with a buyer, you'll notice at the bottom of every MLS customer report and every report that we would give to any member of the public, it says, caution, audio and or video surveillance could be in use. Please do not consider your conversations private. So again, this is more and more prevalent as these devices get less and less expensive and easy to install. You see the ads on TV, you just tack it up to the wall, hook it up to the internet. Now you've got inexpensive surveillance. And again, I think you just have to let your buyer or your seller know that if they're going to use that equipment, they could face some liability. Again, there should be a disclosure. There's a little tent card you can get at the neighbor store that says audio or visual recording devices may be in use on this property. And it's not a bad idea if your customer says, yeah, I intend to use them, to have some disclosure there to protect them. All right. The other thing that I see is 122 is the total amount of compensation you're going to pay. And 136 is your co-broke. I guess I see a few listing contracts every month that say 3% here and 3% there. And that's a problem for you as the listing agent, because if you put 3% here and 3% there, then at closing, how much percent do you get? 0. You've got the broker was paid a total of 3. You paid a total of 3 to the co-broke. The listing agent got 0. So I don't recommend that. But I think people get moving too fast and thinking about it. Okay, it's going to be a 3 and 3 split. So I'll put 3 and 3 in there. Please don't do that. Please put the total compensation here, 6, and down here 3 or 5 and 2.5 or whatever it is. Make sure that these numbers add up to a total so that you can be sure to get paid at closing, which is why I think we all do this. So our brokerage, Keller Williams, does not charge a brokerage charge. Many of our agents charge a one-time fee at closing to cover their costs for administration, maybe for a transaction coordinator. You're free to do that, but you ought to make sure you put it in there and the seller agrees to it. 138 and 139, another two of the most misunderstood lines in the listing contract. This is an NAR requirement that we put this in there. It had something to do with a settlement that they had with the Justice Department about wording in listing contracts. But really, I recommend you check all 3. If it's a transaction broker or a single agent or a no brokerage relationship, and someone brings you a ready, willing, and able buyer, they want to get paid. So I see an awful lot in the MLS where they'll go transaction broker 3, single agent 3, no brokerage 0 or 1. Well, a no brokerage relationship just involves somebody bringing you a contract where they're working with a buyer for which they have a no brokerage relationship. It could mean that they're not in our MLS. It could mean that that's their arrangement with the customer. So I think my suggestion is all 3 of these boxes get checked, and no matter who brings you the contract, they get the co-broke commission. And I just see that, I don't know, I haven't had too many cases where somebody's called and said, why am I only getting 1%? I just have a no brokerage relationship with this customer. But it's just a good idea to check all 3 and pay the co-broke to all 3. This paragraph here is another one that isn't well understood. The paragraph is there to say, okay, I've seen you at the property while you were listed. I met you at an open house and then I called the seller up and go, hey, when is your contract with the listing agent up? And he goes, oh, it's up in, at the end of June. Well, this is the 27th. I looked at the property over the weekend. Why don't we talk right after your listing contract expires? And, we won't have a commission in there, so maybe we can, settle at a little better price. Okay, well, if that happens and there's no new listing contract, but I go back and talk to that seller and we cut a deal, you're entitled to compensation because you introduced that customer to the property during the term of your listing contract. Where it goes away completely is seller's obligation to, on 147, seller's obligation to pay compensation to broker shall cease if seller enters into a bona fide exclusive right and authority to sell contract with another. So the minute the property goes under listing contract after yours is expired or terminated, your ability to collect a commission goes away. But that's what that paragraph is there for. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit here in a few minutes about prorations, but this is where your seller is agreeing to pay certain charges at closing. And it's important that the seller knows these things and that he doesn't get a preliminary closing statement that has surprises in there. So we're going to talk a little bit about preparing a net sheet for the seller so that when you go to that listing appointment, you can deliver the seller not only a paragraph of words, but also a net sheet. Okay. I'll go quickly through here. The seller does not have to complete the seller's disclosure. In Florida, it's not required, even though you may get a call from another agent saying, I have to have a seller's disclosure. There's a lot of cases now where we have the seller never lived in the property, it might have been a rental property, might be an estate situation. And, having a seller's disclosure filled out by a seller that isn't familiar with the property can be liability to the seller. So if there's FIRPTA involved, seller is a foreign person, that means the buyer has to understand the ramifications of that. And the seller really should consult a financial professional. If they don't, I'm sure they already have a TIN usually for what they got when they bought the property. But the seller really has to understand the withholding requirements. Let's see if there's anything else.
Jeff, I have a quick question.
Okay.
For FIRPTA. Is a person that doesn't have a U.S. citizenship but has a permanent residence like a green card consider a foreigner or is consider American?
Pretty sure a green card entitles you to not be subject to FIRPTA.
Oh, okay.
I
Thank
don't expect that, but I'm reasonably sure if you have confirmed residency of some sort, that you do not have to pay withholding. But that's something that really we want to be the source of the source here. We don't want to be making any comments like that. We have to say, well, let me connect you with a tax professional so you can make sure you don't have any tax liability.
Good idea. Yeah.
The lead-based paint thing is if it's built prior to 78, you got to fill that lead-based paint addendum out. We combined the two. We used to have one for listing and one for the sales contract. It's now all combined, but the seller must disclose that they know no lead-based paint situations. That's a federal law, and you as the listing agent must sign it along with the buying agent. We talked about CDDs, again, only if the property has a non-ad valorem tax associated with it is it subject to there. You really want to find out about liens. Is there any talk in your community about an assessment or something coming up? If there is, you need more detail. Remember, the cutoff is if the assessment is passed prior to the effective date, it's the seller's responsibility. If it's passed after, and properly disclosed to the buyer, it's the buyer's responsibility. The default provision does have a little twist at the end here. It says if deposits retained by seller but not exceeding the full amount of compensation, the broker shall be paid compensation. But this doesn't happen too often, but if the buyer defaulted and the seller got the deposit, you do have the right as a broker, we have the right to collect up to the full amount of our commission. In other terms is where you put an alternative MLS date. Property will not be listed on the MLS until such and such. That makes your commencement date and your on MLS date different, for completely permissible by MLS rules. I see a lot where a seller says, okay, well, if you get both sides of the contract, you give me a better deal. And many agents say, okay, we're at 6%. If I get both sides, I'll do it for 5% or 4%. Okay, that would go on that line there. The listing agent, if the listing agent procures the buyer, also the total compensation due from the seller is X. That really should be entered in the MLS as a variable rate commission. It rarely is, but if you're offering a different rate to your seller, if you have both sides of a contract, you really need to disclose that in the MLS, and you're entitled to. I've always encouraged a buyer's agent to call the listing agent before they complete the sales contract, so they can make sure they understand all of the ramifications of what's going on in a multiple offer situation. Do you have both sides? Yes, I do have both sides of one of the deals. Is the seller getting a better rate? Now they could say, well, I don't have to answer that, but oftentimes they say yes. So now you have probably a 1 point difference in the seller's net with a variable rate commission. So you need to know what you're up against. Any addendum that are including the homeowners association disclosure, lead paste Spain addendum, CDD addendum, all those need to be listed on these lines or they're not considered part of the contract. Again, this is the wire fraud advisory is part of the contract, so you don't need a separate wire fraud advisory for compliance purposes. And this is fairly straightforward. It's a great idea to get an address from the seller where they want all correspondence to go. And that's a great thing to put on the sales contract in case there's any notices. Okay, so authorized broker signature. You as agents in our brokerage are authorized to sign that. And the reason I think it's important is if you're going on a listing appointment and I recommend you have the contract in your hot little hand, because by the time you get back and email it and e-sign it and all that, it can be a process. So I recommend you have the contract with you, have it signed, you sign it on 269 with your name next to it, and give a copy to the customer. I see a lot of cases where a customer calls and says, I'm not happy with my listing agent. I'd like to terminate, and they send me their copy of the listing agreement and it's not signed on 269. Is it an agreement? Probably not. So I always recommend you get that signed. The other alternative you have is you can always send those to me to DocuSign or .loop sign or e-sign, however you want, prior to taking it on your or after the seller signed it, you can send it to me to e-sign. Your choice, but you have the right to sign that. That's not true of all brokerages, but we would encourage you to sign it and give a copy to your customer. Okay, so that's a brief fly through of the listing contract. I have one other topic that I'd like to get to today. We've got about 15 minutes, so let's give it a shot. Let's see what we've got here. Okay, so there's an app that you can get on your iPhone or your Android or your Windows desktop. And it's called TA Access One. Now you can get that by doing a Google search or going to the Title Alliance of Collier County, which is our title partner website. But it's a very cool app, and this allows you to do a buyer or seller net sheet. Okay. So I encourage you to have that app on your phone or to put it on your desktop. And you can, before you go on your listing appointment, you can fill this out. And let's say, we're going to do and the broker fee is 6%. Repairs, any of these things you can put in. The property taxes can be put in as a percentage or a dollar amount. And let's say the loan balance is, I took out a loan for $375. Does everybody see this okay? Yes?
Yes.
Good.
Jeff,
All right.
what's the app name?
The app name is TA Access One. You can get
Okay.
it from the App Store or you can download it. I'll put it in here.
Thank you.
It's a really cool app. TA. Okay. And like I say, you can search for it in the App Store or you can search for it online. Like I say, I downloaded this to my Windows desktop, so you can do that there too. But I recommend, to me, this sets you apart from somebody else that shows up and the seller wants to talk to you about your price. And you want to talk to them about the price, but what's really the seller getting at is, I don't know, how much my house is worth. And I don't know, I mean, I have talked to my neighbors, I've looked at Zillow, I know what my estimate is. I know a lot of things, but you're the professional that's there to guide them. You want them to pick the selling price, but you also want to give them as much information as you can. So you can see that you can put this information in, you can put in repairs, you can put in miscellaneous amounts, okay, to add to closing costs, subtract from closing costs. You can customize this, and then when you're done, you can hit compute. And it will give you a really nice little graphic picture, hopefully, of what the seller's net's going to look like. Okay. Now I can share that or print it out and bring it to my my listing presentation. And to me, that kind of sets you apart from somebody that's just coming in saying, my name is Jeff. I walk on water in my spare time and you should work with me. And, here's what the market looks like. And here's the range that I think you should list in and, sign here. I think what you want to talk when the seller says to you, well, I know I have pretty good equity in my house and I know what this estimate is and I know a little bit about the market now that you've helped me, but what do you think? Or what are your thoughts? And you say, well, do you have an idea of what you're going to net at each one of these prices? And they have generally no idea. Well, I know I have a mortgage and I know I owe taxes and I know, so here's a little nice display of it. And also I can click on the details here and it will show me what my total closing costs are, right? I've got $41,000. I've got to pay the closer. and I have dock stamps, and I have interest that I have to pay through the period of when I'm gonna close on July 27th. And here's my brokerage commission. So there's my closing costs. Obviously, I think you can go deeper in here and you can put in the loan, they'll actually calculate the loan balance for you, right? So you can actually put when they bought the property in. So let's say I bought the property on, oops.
Hey, Jeff, does it do any, since you put the property tax percentage in there, does it prorate that? And I don't see it applied there.
Should be. Now, the prorated tax owed took 1.25%, 1.22%, and prorated it to July 27th.
Oh, I see it now. It wasn't on the detail though. That was just,
No, it's got a separate line right here.
yep.
The closing costs really are just the closing fee, the dock stamp, the interest on the loan. And again, I went in when I was messing with this one time, and I went in on the loan balance and said, okay, I bought this property in I bought this property in 2010, right? And I had an interest rate then of 3.75. So I can get this down to a much, a different, and I can set, original home price was, 375. So you can see that it'll give you the actual loan balance if you play around with it a little bit, and then when I recompute it, it will tell me what my loan balance is. And you can do this also, we're going to work on the sales contract next, but we'll talk a little bit about being able to do it for a buyer's net. See, there's my balance on my loan. There's my closing costs. And here's what I'm going to net if I list it for $595. And they can say, well, what happens if we list it for $625? So you can actually get into a dialogue with the seller with your little app and recompute it and talk to them about what they're going to net. To me, that's more meaningful than just talking about what's going on in the market. It's not only what's going on in the market, it's what are you going to walk away in your pocket with if you list at these prices. And as I say, the loan balances may not be exact, but they're pretty close. And
That's really nice. That's a nice tool. That's all sellers care about.
plus you can share it in a PDF, you print it out. If you put your profile in here, right, you can go and put your profile in and it will personalize it to you. You can put all your information in, and then when you do the printout, you can put your picture there and you can put the logo for KW, right? I won't do all that, but you can do that. And when you print it out, hopefully I can go back to this. When you print that out, it should go back and print it out, make a real nice printout for you. I hope. It's a little faster on your phone. This is, because I got about 30 screens open here, but if I share it, you can see that it does a really nice, much more detailed printout. It's got your picture there. It's got your net sheet, all that, your email information. You put your logo in there. So it's a nice, I think it's a nice tool. And my personal opinion is it sets you off, I think. Remember, they're saying that our shift is coming back to a skills-based market rather than a event-driven market. So with a return to a skills-based market, the more information and the more things we can separate ourselves from the competition with, the better off we are. So in a skills-based market, the pressure, goes back to us to know what's going on in the market, which is why we're publishing all these stats. The pressure is to know, what is a current a CMA on the property, what's an equity analysis, and what's my seller's net. That's skill-based marketing. That's skill-based. I arrive at your place. When you leave, you not only know where the selling price is in terms of your market, but you also know if you list it at this price, here's how much you can expect to net, plus or minus, right? There could be some additional repair charges or things like that that you might encounter. But the point is that you can produce a really nice looking report here with all of the information and leave that with them. And they're like, wow, this is different. And there's your face and your name and your brokerage, and they may be meeting with 3 other people. And if you're the only one that had this, or the only one that had a nice personalized version that you use to help them set the selling price, I think that's some value added. I think that's some skill-based work on your part, and the tools are available, and it's 3 o'clock. So anyhow, I hope you enjoyed it. I don't want to keep you beyond your time. I appreciate you hanging in there with me. You have any questions or comments, text me, call me. Let me know how I can help you.
Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Welcome.